Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Are you all awake?
Yeah.
Have some coffee? All right. So we are going to talk a little bit about the topic of AI is eating the world, and we'll give you our kind of thoughts on this. But before we kick it off, we thought it might be really good to just give you a 2-minute intro of each of us.
You would like to start?
Sure. So my name is Florian Leibert, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Mesosphere. And at Mesosphere, we're building a cloud operating system. So a lot of the work that I did before was in engineering at companies like Twitter and Airbnb, where I worked on ML applications such as trending, user search, and Airbnb, I worked on the search and the cloud infrastructure. And we basically took a lot of these concepts to start Mesosphere as a company.
Yeah, so my name is Andreas. I'm the CEO and co-founder of KONUX. So my background's in information systems, where I studied first here in Munich, then went to Stanford, where I dropped out to build KONUX. And at KONUX, we use sensor data and AI to basically increase railway operation efficiency and empower them to operate with a high availability. So who of you took the train in the last week?
Wow.
How many of you had a delay with the train? Oh, it's quite as many as basically put their hands up in the first time. So this is a problem we're solving, and this is what we're trying to do. So I know you don't really like the word AI, but now you're sitting on a stage where AI is eating the world. So how does that come?
So, well, as we were brainstorming about what to talk about, we said, look, the marketer in me really wants to say AI. The engineer in me really wants to call it ML. So I think those two are actually quite a bit different. I think AI is very aspirational, and I don't think we are quite there yet. I think there are projects that have been formulated in AI, such as Google Brain, and I guess Watson was one of them as well, which wanted to be really universally applicable machine learning across a broad set of problems. I think what's actually where we are today is really we're at an age of machine learning, where machine learning is transforming certain industries. You basically apply a certain algorithm or a certain set of algorithms to an industry vertical and get a lot of automation out of it. You get cost savings out of it. And just to kind of give you a little bit of background of that, I thought maybe I'll talk about when I joined Twitter in 2009. As I mentioned, we were working on a system called trending. Probably if you use Twitter, you've seen this algorithm at work. It shows you what's going on at Twitter right now. So, for example, if Trump talks about something really exciting, then you see that on Twitter, and you can click on it, and you see all the tweets that relate to this trending word. It's so really like how trending was built was not. We didn't even call it machine learning back then. We just called it statistics. So we took this data set of all of Wikipedia, and we indexed each word and figured out the frequency of how often does a certain word appear. Of course, taking out words like the, a, and like a bunch of filler words. But then what we would do is we would just take a time window of 5 minutes or 10 minutes and rerun this algorithm in order to count the words then and figure out what's the delta of how often a certain word should appear versus how often it was actually appearing. So the background model versus the foreground model. And this is what became Twitter trending. So you just rank the words that are actually way out of whack, that are appearing way more often than they should, and those are the words that you bubble up. And it shows you really like, I mean, a lot of people would actually, I think, in our industry call this AI, but I think it's really statistics, which now we call machine learning because we automated it, and hopefully at some point we'll be at a full AI where Google Brain actually fully functions across a broad set of topics. So, Andy, you've mentioned the transportation problem earlier. Maybe you can give us a little bit of background of how you guys are using machine learning in order to actually do what you do with the company.
Yeah, so like Alexandra was basically mentioned in the introduction, so I think we're now coming to the point where it's not a buzzword, just a buzzword anymore. There's real customer value that gets created. So, but I think it's very, very specific. So when we found the company, we truly believe that we have to go vertical, not horizontal, because in business operations, and especially in let's say old heavy industries like railway, I mean, you need to somehow create an impact in their day-to-day operations, and this is the whole part of optimization where machine learning can help a lot. Just to give you an example, so in railway, there's a big issue with crossings and switches. So just in Europe, we have 500,000 switches, and they cause around 21% of all delay minutes in the infrastructure. And so the question is, why is that so? Because today their operations is still, they go out, measure manually, writing a protocol, scan this protocol, compare this protocol, and this is what they do every half a year. And in between, they just don't know how the status of health of that asset is changing. And so what we do is we basically help them to get the state of health every day, and also predict into the future when they have to go out to maintain what with which tools. And usually, when you look at basic statistics, you couldn't really solve that problem because every of those assets is somehow behaving a little bit differently, and you don't want to build just a model for every single of 70 or 500,000 assets, because this will cost you so much in engineering that might be even better to keep it the old way. But what machine learning is enabling you is basically build generalizable models which are adapting to this specific situation, and through that you can basically help in that industry the customers to have less costs in their operations, because they have less breakdowns because they know ahead of time when they have to go out to maintain. And on the other side, you increase availability, because if your assets don't break down, you don't have any train delays anymore. And that's also what we want to achieve with KONUX, is that we make trains arrive on time. So, I mean, from our side, when we look at machine learning, there's this in transportation, this, let's say, this huge problem with trains, but there's also something else which is related to cars. And I heard that Munich is quite big in cars. Yeah. So, and I heard you do something there.
Yeah, so it's actually funny, if you go down, there's a Mercedes down there, and it actually it looks like it has half a data center in it, right? It's like a Mercedes from 1994, and it was one of, I guess it must have been Daimler Chrysler back then still. It was one of the first connected, was it 1990, was it?
1994.
1994, yeah. It was a 1994 Mercedes E-Class, I think, and it has like a screen in it, it has like a trackball in it, and it looks like literally someone put a data center inside a car. And of course at Mesosphere, what we are doing right now is we're working a lot with connected car companies and autonomous car efforts. And one of them is Audi. The Audi e-tron actually uses our backend, or our software for the backend for the data processing, for the creation of the machine learning models behind it and all of that. And it's quite an exciting time, and I do think so. Oftentimes the discussion gets stuck here in Germany when you talk about autonomous driving. The first thing that usually gets mentioned is the problems with autonomous driving, and people are like, oh, what's the car going to do in a situation where you have to either save the driver or the kids that are crossing the road, right? Like we always heard this debate, and I think this debate is actually quite pointless, because machine learning is supposed to really optimize globally and not locally. So meaning you're actually trying to make driving much safer. You're not trying to really optimize for either the driver or the kids here. You're trying to just make it much safer. And I mean, if you think about it, right? I mean, if you're driving a car, I don't know how many of you have gotten a cell phone text message while driving, or have looked at the navigation system. It's, I mean, never, right? So of course you shouldn't do that, but it still happens, and I think that's way worse than having a globally well-intended algorithm that's trying to solve this autonomous car problem. On top of that, I think there's this misconception that machine learning today is a bunch of if-then-else statements, right? And really, it's much more of a black box than that. It's usually modern machine learning technologies like recurrent neural networks and deep learning. All of that is it's really hard actually for the person who programmed or trained the model to figure out why a certain decision has happened the way it has happened. That's actually a real problem. So it's not like you're putting in there if children crossing the road and the situation really complex, just drive over the children. That's not how it works. So I'm really like, I guess with this theme of this conference, I'm actually pretty optimistic what can happen. But going back to the title here, AI is eating the world. I mean, what are your thoughts about where this could lead to, and where this optimism I guess comes from?
Yeah, I mean, there was a famous sentence, I think it was 2010, from Mark Andreessen, which said, "Software is eating the world." And now we're here, 2019, and I think everybody can say software has eaten the world. So in every single business process, in our day-to-day life, like software has just became so much part of it and basically controlling so much of it. Now if people date, they use software. If people go and make a table reservation, they use software. I mean, basically software is everywhere, and I think we reached that stage. And now we have 2019, and we can say, hey, AI is eating the world. And maybe if we look 10 to 15 years ahead, AI will be part of everything. It will be part of every single business process of maybe and it already starts now. Where you go for dinner, where you go for lunch, is basically determined by an algorithm which learns a certain behavior from yourself, which takes the correlation of where do your friends go, and I think and where the real big impact will be is, I think, in the industrial world, because there is so much need still for automation, and we are always looking at with the wave, and especially in Germany, of Industry 4.0, that there's those automated basically production halls, but the reality is quite different. The reality is that there is a lot of manual stuff which can be automated, and if I look in 10, 15 years, AI can be like Andrew said from Baidu, electricity. Basically, AI can be electricity of the 21st century. So,
yeah, I think there's this quote: just like electricity put everything around you to life, AI or machine learning makes all the objects intelligent, autonomous, and that it's quite a big opportunity. And I think, I think opportunity-wise, I think it's.
So who is going to win? Who is going to win the AI race? Is it China? Is it the US? Or now we're here in Germany? Who is going to win it?
I think conventional wisdom would tell you that a lot of innovation obviously happens in Silicon Valley first and foremost, and then maybe China second. But I think that there's a ton of opportunity for Germany and in Europe in general, because we have I think we have quite a unique industry, right? Like we have in Germany we have this concept of Mittelstand, which is some of the most advanced which entails some of the most advanced manufacturing companies, right? So, for example, I always like to tell Americans about this. We have a company somewhere in the middle of the Black Forest that's making concrete pumps for skyscrapers, right? So, if you have to actually pump up concrete really high, that's the company that makes the best concrete pumps in the world. Or we have, sorry. Putzmeister, yes, that's right. That's the company. Sorry. And there's like countless examples of this, right? And that's actually a really unique opportunity. And rather than trying to really imitate what Silicon Valley is done, right? I think that's the game is too late for like imitating. I think we got to be innovative, and we got to figure out how can we actually take what we have as a unique advantage here in Germany, which is this Mittelstand, which is these tens of thousands of companies that we have here, and really figure out how to propel automation forward and how to create enormous or unleash enormous economic value here. And I think that's I think really again very much in line with the conference about optimism.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, basically the application know-how we have here in Germany and in Europe about machinery and all those heavy industrials, they will, I mean, this is really a unique advantage because if you want to train a model, you have to give context. If you don't have context, basically you just predict something. And I think also that Europe and especially Germany, which basically where our roots are, we have a unique opportunity here. And now I think we just have to do it.
Yeah. And I think that the foundation is there, right? Like, and everybody can use the foundation. So companies like Google and Microsoft are actually working collaboratively in order to create technologies like, I mean, TensorFlow, for example, which makes it ridiculously easy for someone who's been trained for just a few years on statistics or advanced statistics to actually come up with novel machine learning algorithms and implementation. So I think that the kind of foundational piece is in place. It's actually it's been really accelerated with the advent of open source and really open source taking a hold in every industry over the last 10 years. So I don't think that there is that much of a technology discrepancy between Europe, China, and the US anymore. I think it's now about really picking the right applications or picking the right vertical industries and innovating.
And create customer value. So thank you very much. Are there any questions? and Steffi is always right, as we know at DLD.
Hey, Margot.
Yeah, I got a mic. I got a microphone for you. Okay.
Sure. I don't know if I can touch it.
Perfect.
So you say that today is the era of machine learning. How far away are we from real AI? When is it actually going to be real? And what is it going to be used for when it's real?
So I think it's a hard. I think this question it's a great question, but I think it's super hard to answer. I mean, I think the most advanced effort probably is Google Brain, and I mentioned this earlier. I think Watson was supposed to kind of be this universally applicable AI that actually probably did not succeed the way IBM wanted it to succeed. I think there were some really interesting studies that were made and that were pretty promising, but in the end it was not as transformational across industries as it could have been. I think Google Brain is probably the closest thing. I don't know their internal timeline, but I don't know. I don't.
5 to 10 years. That's always right.
That's always the right answer. 5 to 10 years. Yeah.
Any other questions?
No other question.
No other questions.
There's one.
No, actually, there's a question back there.
Back there.
Sorry, not good at catching things in the air. So, we haven't really talked much about hype around it, or what's your thought about hype in AI? Because just a bit of background, we know that AI is very good at specific tasks, but like general intelligence, it's heavily overhyped, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. So I think what I tried to point out in the beginning is that it is really good in those specific solving specific problems, and I think this has to happen. And now we just kind of at the beginning of creating first value with those very specific solving very specific problems. But I'm a true believer at a certain point of time when the specific problems will be solved, that like in every platform game and in every generalizable game, there will be it will be more generalized when the specific problems have been solved. So, and this will probably take another 10 years.
Yeah.
Oh well, no, there we go. Hi. Hi, morning.
Morning.
AI runs on data, and Europe is patting itself on the back for rightly, perhaps restrictive data policies. And the AI superpowers are supposed to be China and the US, partly because of the access to gigantic pools of data that they're going to have. If Europe's going to have a third way, how do we get some kind of open data market? How do we get all the Mittelstand to unlock their data? Because you can't have AI running unless it has data to eat. So how do we put those two together, AI and a data market?
I think it's also a great question, and I'm actually quite excited about where we can go. First of all, I think right now what's happening is the foundational layer, the developer cloud of data processing, of data transport and data storage and all of that is happening in 4 places. It's happening in at Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and Ali Cloud, right? So there's no developer cloud for Europe. And I think that actually needs to change, because I think right now is the time. So against conventional wisdom, over the last 10 years, with the advent of open source and all of these technologies, we have everything we need, and we can just figure out how to operate. And I think there's tremendous business value in that, because obviously the 2 margin-hungriest companies on earth are chasing AWS. That means there's a lot of money to be made, right? So the margins are super high, and we can go there, take the open source technology and make it much cheaper, right? By, for example, changing the consumption-based pricing into fixed pricing and all of that. That's one step, and I think then the next step, once we have the technical capabilities of actually keeping the data in Europe and the data processing in Europe, I think the next step could be to really figure out data regulation and say, look, for projects that are actually based on European soil, for example, we'll be less restrictive with our. I mean, we should own our data, right? So that could be helped with regulation, and so I think it's like a multi-step process. But I'm optimistic that right now is actually a great time for being more innovative here in front of our front door, so to speak.
Unternehmertum, Munich University.
Cool.
Technical University.
Good morning. Hi, Andy. Hi, Flo. So to make this more concrete, Andy, so where do you see the sweet spot in this international game, also in comparison to China and to the US for KONUX? So what's the position of KONUX in this game?
Yeah, I think so. When we thought about it, and we have also a lot of US money, we thought, okay, or should it be more of a US-centric or a German-centric company? And I think you have to be there where the customers are and where the problem is. And I think this puts Germany and this puts Europe in a special position, because, as I mentioned, when I asked you how many people travel by train, and half of you, or more than half of you, raised their hands, this shows like, hey, this is critical for the society. So everybody wants to have a punctual, available train and to get from one to the other place. And I think you always should be there where the pain points are from your customers, and this, as mentioned, puts Germany in a very special position, I think, in the transportation sector, from the rail and as well as automotive. I think we're still very, I think we have the best opportunities, and it's also where we position ourselves. I think the global market leader in that case should and will come out of Europe.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.